Okay, so first of all, I'm going to create a second copy of this table using formulas. So I'm going to insert some blank columns here, then do equals and select the first cell, then click and drag it across and double click to fill it down. And if we go down to the bottom, you can see it's filled in to the bottom of the table. Just going to make that a little bit skinnier. And then I'm going to select somewhere inside the table, press Ctrl A to select everything, then go to Insert and insert a scatter chart with smooth lines. Now I have the chart here, but you can see it doesn't look very nice. To start off with, there is one data series that is much larger than all the others, so it's squashing all of the others down the bottom. I want each of my panel charts to be about the same size, so I need each of my data series to have a range which is about the same. So I'll start by calculating the range, which is going to be the maximum of the whole column minus the minimum of the whole column. And then I'll drag this across, and you can see this column here has a much larger range than all of the others, and I want to make this smaller, so I'm going to divide all of my numbers by 100 and then enter. Then I will double click to fill in the rest of the table like this, and this is why I created a second copy of the table using formulas. I wanted to easily be able to change the numbers like this. Now I still think this is a little high, so I'm going to change it to divided by 110 instead. And now I have a range of 170, which I think is better. Now I want the ranges for all of my other data series to be about the same as this. So for CO, the range is 340, so I think dividing this by 2 should get me to about 170. And that's 169 there, so that's good. For ozone, the range is 56, so I think timesing this by 3 should get me to about 170. Then for NO2, the range is 10, so I think timesing this by 17 will get me to about 170. And then for NO and SO2, these are both very small, so I need to times these by a large number to get them to 170. So I'll times this one by 50 and this one by 60. And now they all have a range of about 170. My next issue is that the data are all currently overlapping, so I now need to spread them out. If the range is 170, rounding that up will get me to about 200, so I will space these out by 200 each time. We'll start on this side, and I'll just leave this as it is and keep the SO2 at the bottom. Then for this one, I'm going to add 200 to it. And now you can see I have this particular data set separated out from the rest of them. For the next one, I will add 400. And this now gets separated out as well. And I'm adding on an extra 200 each time, so this will become 600. And then I will add 800 onto here. And then add 1,000 onto this one. And now I have all of my data separated out. I'm going to do some quick formatting to this, so I don't want a chart title or these grid lines. I have a gap on either side which I don't want, so I'll change the axes. I'll increase the minimum slightly and decrease the maximum slightly. And also the dates are overlapping at the moment, so I'll change the formatting of the dates so they don't overlap. Then I also have a gap at the top, so I'll change this axis as well and change the maximum to 1200. Now I have the beginnings of my panel chart. We can have a bit more of a detailed look at how they are separated out. So it looks like the grey line here, ozone, is actually a little bit high. So maybe I didn't need to increase it by such a large number. So I'll decrease this to 575 instead. And you can see that moves down a little. I want it in between the grey lines. And then also for the orange line up here, the CO, this is going over the top grey line. So I'll decrease this a little as well to 770. And you can see that moves down a little. So now they're a bit more evenly spaced out. Now, your range and the amount that you add on in order to separate them will be different, but you just want to do a little bit of trial and error until you get the panel chart looking the way you want. The next step is to fix the axes here, because obviously now these numbers don't actually represent the real data. And I want my axes to go from side to side. So I want it to start here, and then for the blue data to be on this side, then to go back to this side and to alternate from side to side. I'm going to do this by creating two fake axes, by making two data series, and then adding data labels to them to get the numbers that I want. So I will add in some more blank columns up here, and I'll type this as axis 1. Then for axis 1, I'm going to need x values, I'm going to need y values, and then also what I want the data labels to be. For the x values, if I want the first axis to be going up here, then the number for the x will be the same all the way down, and it's going to be the very edge of this here, which is actually my first data point. So in my case, it's the 1st of July. Then for the y values, if I click on this axis here, I'm going to change the major units to basically put in as many numbers here as I can fit. So if I change it to 50, you can see I have loads of numbers now squashed in here without them actually overlapping. So I think my y values are going to start at 0 and go up by 50. Then I'm going to select the top two and drag it down so it will go up by 50 each time until I get to 1200. Then I can drag the date down as well until it matches. Now the date goes up by 1 each time, which is not what I want. So if I click on here, I can change it to copy cells, then it stays the same. Then for the data labels, I want to separate this out into different compounds. So the first one here, the green line, is SO2. So that's going to be this one here. I want that to go from 0 to 200. Then between 200 and 400, I want the blue line here, which is NO. So at 200, I'll put NO in here. Then at 400, it goes to the yellow line, which is NO2. So I'll put NO2 in here. Then at 600 I will put ozone, and 800 will be CO, and 1000 will be CN. Then if we start at the top with SO2, we need to calculate the data labels to be whatever the values actually are, which means we need to undo what we did to the numbers last time. So basically do the opposite of whatever we did. So I times these numbers by 60 last time. So I now need to take the y values and divide them by 60 to get back to the actual numbers. And I'll drag this down to 200 because the green line here goes from 0 to 200. Then for NO, I actually want this axis to be on the other side, so I'm going to skip that. Then for NO2, we'll start at 400. And for this one, I timesed it by 17 and then added 400. So we will this time subtract 400 and divide it by 17 to undo what we did last time, and then drag it down to 600. Then for ozone, I want that label to be on the other side, so we'll go to CO, and I divided it by 2 and then added 770. So I need to minus 770 and then times it by 2. And then drag that down to 1000, and we'll skip the bottom one. Now I've got the first axis created. I'm going to add this to the chart. So select the chart and right click and select data, then add. Series name will be axis 1. X values will be these values here. Y values will be these values here. And OK. Now I have this dark blue line here, so I'll do some formatting on this by changing it to black. Just click yes for that, then making it a little bit thinner. And now while I still have it selected, adding data labels, then selecting the data labels and putting them on the left hand side, and now they completely overlap with the actual axes numbers underneath, but I don't want those numbers, so I'll untick the Y value option and tick value from cells instead. Then select the data labels that we just created and enter. And now we have these numbers on the side. I'm going to format these a little and change them so they have only 2 decimal places. The formatting of the numbers here will copy whatever is here, and then I'll get rid of the real axes underneath by changing labels to none. And now you can see we have our pretend axes in here, which shows the actual numbers of our data. I am also going to go back to axis 1 and add in a marker here. It will be the dash with no border and a solid black fill. And now you can see this looks kind of like tick marks. I don't, however, want the tick marks in the places where I don't have numbers, so I'm going to get rid of this by deleting the Y values wherever I don't have data labels. And you can see here now the tick marks and the black line have disappeared, and I'll do that here as well and also down here. And now it looks like I have 3 individual axes. Now I've done that for one side, I'm going to do the same thing again for the other side. So if we go here, I'll type axes 2, then copy the labels again. I'll add a space here and then copy these as well to make it easier to line everything up. Now this time the x values are still going to be all the same number, but they're going to be the opposite end of the graph. So in my case, I need these to be the 27th of July 2011. Then the y values will be the same as they were before, so starting at 0 and going up by 50 each time until we get to 1200. Then I can take the date and drag that down to be the same height. Change it so they're all the same date. Now for SO2, I don't need data labels this time because they're on the other side. So we'll start with NO at 200, and for NO, I timesed by 50 and then added 200. So I need to subtract 200 and then divide by 50 and then drag this down to 400. Now you can see the axes here overlap at the beginning and end, which is actually why I wanted to have them alternating in the first place. Then we'll go to ozone here. So for ozone, I timesed it by 3, then added 575. So I need to subtract 575 and then divide it by 3 and drag that down to 800, and we'll just check I did that correctly. And then the last one here is CN, and for that I divided by 110 and then added 1000. So down here I need to subtract 1000 and then times it by 110. Drag that down. And so now I have my second axis. I can add this to the chart as well. So select the chart and right click and select data and add axes 2. These are the x values and these are the y values. And then I have this brown line here, so I'll select that and press Ctrl 1 to open up the formatting bar. Then change this to black, make it thinner, add a marker, which is a dash and has no border and has a black solid fill. So now I have what looks like tick marks. Then while that's still selected, add in the data labels. Select the data labels and move them to the right. Then instead of having the y value shown, choose values from cells. And it will be these data labels here, which we just created. And OK. Now I have the data labels there. I'm going to change this section here so it only has 2 decimal places, and then move this in a bit so the numbers don't overlap with the chart. Then the tick marks in between the numbers I want to remove, so delete the y values wherever there aren't data labels. And now it looks like I have 3 axes on this side as well. Now there's a couple of different options you can have when you do this. I can delete the grid lines and then also select the vertical axes here and change it to no line. Then I basically have the axes and the data sort of floating on their own. I can also add in a solid line here. Then for the vertical axes, change the major units back to normal, then add in grid lines, and for the grid lines I will make these black as well, and for good measure I'll change this down here to be black too. And then we have what looks like little boxes. Now, older versions of Excel don't have this option for value from cells, so you need to find a way around that. Basically, you can double click on a data label and then actually type in what you want. Or you can double click on a data label, then go up to the formula bar and equals, and then select the number that you want from the cell. And that will also get you the number. But doing it one at a time like that can be kind of fiddly. So another option is to insert a text box. Then just type in the numbers that you want. Then we'll format these a little bit so they'll be right aligned and a smaller font, and then change the text box so it has no shape outline and no shape fill, and then put these over the top of the numbers and try and line them up. You can control the spacing between the numbers by going inside the text box and selecting them all, then right click and paragraph. Then for the spacing option, choose exactly and then choose the spacing that you want. So for example, if I do a spacing of 5, the numbers are now all scrunched together. And if I go in and highlight these again and right click and paragraph and change it to 15, the numbers are then all much more spaced out. So with a little bit of trial and error, you can get them to line up with the rest of the axes. Now, another issue that you might have is that with all the messing around with the numbers, then the axes numbers you end up with aren't really like the nice round numbers that you're used to seeing on the axes. They can be kind of weird numbers. So a way around this is to try and change the data labels up here. And you want to make them about the same amount spaced out as the other numbers. So I'll make this 0 and then make this number plus 0.75 and then drag this down here. And now the numbers in the axes are much more reasonable, but they're in the wrong place because I haven't adjusted the y values. I need to change the y values, and we're basically doing the opposite of what we did before. So for SO2, I times all of the numbers by 60. So in here, I need to take this number and times it by 60 and then drag it down. And then the tick marks will be in the correct place. Okay, and then finally, you need to make sure to delete axes 1 and axes 2 from the legend. If you're lucky, you should be able to take your legend and spread it out over the panel charts and line them all up. Okay, so in this video I have shown you how to make panel charts in Excel. To summarize, you want to put all of the data into one chart and then mess around with the data until each of the data sets has about the same range and is evenly spaced out. Then you need to create 2 fake axes using data sets and data labels on either side of the chart. In a previous video, I have shown a different method for making panel charts in Excel, which involves making individual charts and then lining them all up. Okay, and that is everything.